Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Reactjs interview series. Welcome to our channel. We are Techies. My name is Sumit, and this is part three of our Reactjs interview series. So let's start with a basic level question, which I ask the candidates to check how they debug their code. Okay, the question is things you can do to detect problems during development. So there are two common ways to do that. One is using strict mode, which you can use to find common bugs in your components early during development, and the second is profiler to measure your rendering performance. So let's see how that is done. So let's first see how strict mode is used. Strict mode does three things majorly. It will find the issues caused by impure rendering, it will find the issues caused by missing effect cleanup, and it will check for the usage of deprecated APIs. Okay, so impure rendering, it will check by rendering an extra time. Okay, it will re-render an extra time. For missing effect cleanup, that return statement that you have to keep in the use effect, and whether you're doing the cleanup, you're unsubscribing or doing the proper cleanup, that is also checked, but it will rerun the effect an extra time. Okay, it will also check the usage of deprecated API. So it will throw warning if any of these three things happen in your code. Okay. So strict mode is used like this. It is wrapped over your app. So it can be wrapped over your app or it can be enabled for specific components as well. Okay. All of these checks are development only and do not impact the production build. So these extra re-render and extra rerun of the effects, you don't have to worry about it in production. It will be only done during your development. Okay. uh, let's see an example where your strict mode can be useful. So in this example, as you see, I'm trying to push items with the same ID again and again, and that particular ID I'm using as a key in the list. So this list will have multiple duplicate keys, which is not desirable, right? So in that case, your strict mode will throw a warning, which will say that you have used two children or two or more children with the same key, and this behavior is unsupported. Okay, so this is how strict mode can be useful during your development. Next is profiler, and profiler is used for measuring rendering performance of the app. And this profiler tab can be enabled in your browser by adding React DevTools extension. Then you'll be able to see the profiler tab. In order to start profiling, you have to do three steps. First, hit the record button here. It will start the profiling. Then use your application as you usually would, and then again hit the record button to finish the recording. After that, you will see this kind of graph. There are certain color codes involved here. If it is yellow, that means your component is taking longer than expected time. If it is blue, that means your component is doing good, it is taking less time. And if it is gray, that means your component hasn't been called yet. Okay, you can use profiler by wrapping your app in a profiler tag. You have to pass an ID and then you have to pass an on render function. Okay, so this was profiler, which you can use to measure the rendering performance of your components. Next, we will see some important hooks. We'll start with use context. So what is use context or context API, and why do we need it? React context provides data to components no matter how deep they are in the components tree. The context is used to manage global data. So this is an important line. The context is used to manage global data. Example, global state, theme, authenticated user, preferred language, a collection of services. Okay, so you must have used themes, and you must have required the authenticated user details. So all this can be passed as a context to your application. What is the problem that context solves? The problem that context solves is the props drilling problem. Now let's see what is a prop drilling problem. Okay, so suppose parent component has authenticated user details and child component C requires those details. Okay, now what is the old traditional way to do it? Parent component will pass the required details as a prop to child component A, then it will pass to component B, and B will pass to C. So this whole process is undesirable and is called prop drilling, and it is a problem which use context provides a solution to. Okay. Now, how to use the context? React requires three simple steps to use the context. First is creating the context, then providing the context, and consuming the context. For creating the context, React has provided a built-in factory function called create context. You just need to import it and provide a default value to it, as it accepts one optional argument, okay, the default value. Providing the context, you have to wrap your component which requires the context in a context.provider component, okay, and this context value you have to pass it to. So in order to change the value of the context, you can change here and provide it to the context provider. Whatever value that you provide to the provider will be available to the my component and its child component, okay. So this is important. If you want to change the context value, simply update the value prop, okay. Third is consuming the context. So now the hook use context is used for consuming the context. Okay. Earlier, before 16.8 version of React, we have this context.consumer. We can use that as well to consume the context. But now, since this React hook has been introduced, it is better and recommended to use context. Okay. So use context, you can use this hook from React, and you can just import the context what you have provided earlier, right? Which the context that you have created in the first step, that you can provide to the use context, and you'll be able to use the values that you provided in the step B, right? Those values you'll be able to use here, okay, in the my component. Okay, so I will create a detailed video about the use context hook. Since this is just a React interview series, I'll not get into details and show you examples of coding the context and all. But this is just a brief overview how the context works in general. Okay. Next is use reducer. The question that I ask related to use reducer is, when do we prefer use reducer over use state? So the answer is in point 3. Use reducer is preferred over use state when you have complex state logic that involves multiple sub values. Okay. But let's discuss what is use reducer first. So use reducer is a React hook that lets you add a reducer to a component. So reducer is a function that we add to the component. Okay. So we'll talk about this later on. So what use reducer does is it will separate out the state management from the rendering logic of the component. Okay. So this is the syntax how use reducer takes three arguments: reducer, initial argument, and an optional init function, and returns an array which consists of state and dispatch function. Okay. Uh, So let's understand use reducer with this example that I found online. So in this example, we have a stopwatch which has a state which has two properties, okay, is running and time. So this state has two properties, is running and time. And it is the state is dependent on four actions on the stopwatch. Okay, so you can start the stopwatch, you can stop the stopwatch, you can reset the stopwatch, and you can tick the stopwatch. Okay, so all these actions, for all these actions, we write a reducer function. Okay, and we update the state according to the action. Okay, so when we say start, we are updating the state by updating is running property to true. In stop, we are updating is running property to false. In reset, we are setting the is running property as false and time as 0. And for tick, we are just changing the time. We are just incrementing the time basically by 1. Okay. So this after creating this reducer function, we pass this reducer function to use reducer hook, and we pass the initial state. So initial state of the false of the stopwatch would be is running false and time equal to 0. Okay. Now this use reducer function will return an array of state and a function called dispatch function. So in this dispatch function, you can basically pass the action. Okay. So when you pass the action to the dispatch, which we are using here, right? This action and the state is passed to the reducer. Okay. This action and the current state is passed to the reducer, and reducer will return the state after that. Okay, this state. So this is how the reducer is used. So this state you can then use in your component state.time here we have used, right? Yeah. So this is a very good example of use reducer. So guys, this is it for this video. Up next, we will discuss some React.js advanced design patterns, render props, higher order components, custom hooks, headless components, some performance optimization and memoization hooks like use callback and use memo. So lots of interview questions are still to be discussed, and we'll discuss in the next part. So please subscribe our channel if you like the content, and please do support our channel by sharing and liking the video. Thank you.